And so my background, again, just to reiterate, is I'm certified E&O auditor, instructor, expert witness. I'm a certified business appraiser, which is pretty much the highest certification for business appraisers. And I think I'm the only one in the insurance industry that has a CBA. They quit offering it because it was too hard to pass. And so they just gave up. But out of all of the E&O work I've done and all of the valuations and the due diligence that I've done, I kept coming across the following problems. The vast majority of producers at retail agencies and account managers, and then also with the underwriters that I'm dealing with through my retail agent clients, or I consult for insurance companies too, they don't understand what they're doing. They really don't. They totally lack coverage knowledge. And a good example from an underwriter perspective is that I recently bought a ranch. And then when I went to buy the ranch, I formed my little LLC, and I went to get insurance for it. And my agent, and I know all of you that work at companies that are listening here are just probably cringing that my agent would ever do this. But being that I know a fair amount about insurance, he said, "Hey, why don't you join me on the call with the underwriter?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that." So I joined him on the call with the underwriter, and the underwriter says, "Well, we can't insure your ranch." I was like, well, "Why not?" And by the way, this is a national carrier who has a specialty in farm and ranch, and they actually have a subspecialty in smaller farms and ranches. This is as far as ranches in the West go, it's a small one. And he says, we can't insure it. And I'm like, "But that's your specialty." And he says, "Yeah, we can't insure us." "Why can't you insure it?" He says, "Because it's vacant." And I said, "It's not vacant. It's completely fenced. And your form says that if it's fenced, it's not vacant." And he says, "But it's vacant." And by definition, it's not vacant, number one. Number two, I'm not asking you to insure the land. I am asking for liability for an LLC. It's not the same thing. And his response was, "But we don't insure land." And it's like, all right, there's a guy out there, an underwriter, and I started my career as an underwriter 36 years ago now. It's like, how is it that you work for a national carrier, a specialty underwriter, and you don't understand what it is you're actually insuring? How many sales, high quality sales, are being lost because the underwriters have no clue what the policies even say that they're underwriting to? How can you underwrite when you don't know what you're underwriting to? And you have to underwrite to the form, one way or another. You can't make the judgments on whether it's a good risk or a bad risk without knowing what's in the form. So this is we're just shooting ourselves in the foot or the head with ignorance, whether it's at the agency level or it's the carrier level. It doesn't really matter. And we're also really creating a reputational issue for ourselves, and we're costing ourselves a ton of extra money when we have claims adjusters that can't read a form either. And these are just examples that I've come across. And this is one I got involved with. This is the actual policy language. The policy reads, "The BPO service provider means any third-party independent contractor." So first of all, stop there. Is everybody in agreement that it's a service provider that's an independent contractor? All in agreement, including the adjuster. Were they providing outsourcing services? Yes, everyone's in agreement. Was there a written contract? Yes, everybody's in agreement all the way to that point. Question then became, was it including but not limited to call center services, fulfillment services, or logistical support? The adjuster denied the claim because it was the third-party vendor was not providing call center services, fulfillment services, and arguably logistical support. I might disagree on that point, but neither here nor there. This is an adjuster that also has a law degree, so you would think that they would be able to read a contract. And I said to her, I said, why are you denying the claim? And she says, because it's not a call center service, it's not a fulfillment service, and it's not logistical support. And I said, that says including, but not limited to. And her verbatim response was, I interpret that as limited to. Like, how in the world do you come to that conclusion? That is bad faith claims adjusting. Point blank, bad faith claims adjusting. And this is a major national carrier. What's the future of our industry if we have such ignorant, uneducated people? And these are adults with plenty of education. We have to fix this, or our industry is in serious hurt. We will be dumbed down, in my opinion, to nothing but selling policies that may or may not have any application. So I'm going through this daily with clients in the real world of working with agencies and insurance carriers all over the United States and Canada, a little bit in Europe. And I keep coming across people that should have a lot of knowledge. One of the things that really got me to want to invent a new education system, which is what I'll share with you, is I was doing an E&O audit for an agency. The same producer, this is a person who had 10 plus years experience. If you look at his sales numbers were phenomenal. They were way better than normal. This is a person who had designations, professional insurance designations from at least 2 of the major designation organizations in our industry. And 2 out of 3 years, he had made the same exact mistake relative to a work comp claims. He did not know, and he honestly, genuinely did not know that when he was providing work comp insurance to a commercial client, and then they had jobs out of state, that the coverage changed, that you had to have all states coverage. And he blew it. And these were 7-figure claims that the agency lost in both cases. Hands down, they had no defense. They lost them. I was in there doing the audit in a last-ditch effort so that they could even get E&O insurance and stay in business at that stage. How does someone with 10 plus years experience and designations from 2 major organizations in our industry not know something so basic? These are the situations I come across all the time. And I thought, hey, I don't know where I'm going to find the extra time, but I'm going to create a new education system because I want to address the price of ignorance. I want to help my agency clients. I want to help them avoid losing sales, because the fact is, you can't sell something that you don't know exists. And I was involved in a humongous E&O case that lasted 7 years. The legal fees were $750,000, and it involved a product that did not exist in that state. It existed in other states, but not that state. But that being said, no one in that agency knew it existed anywhere. And they probably should have. I see this a lot. So we're losing sales because we don't know these products exist. And carrier underwriters, they don't know their own forms and don't know it exists, so they don't sell it and they don't take care of it. And we were talking before we started, there is a new class of insurance distributors that have entered the market in the last 5 or so years, 7 years, who couldn't care less. They absolutely could not care less whether they are selling the right product. They don't even pretend to educate their people. They do no education beyond the, hey, here's for $100, you get 4 hour CE credit in 45 minutes type classes. That's all they invest in. They don't care. And the carriers have all appointed them. The carriers don't really care too much if the client gets the right coverages. That's evident in the support that these new distributors have received from the carriers. And they save a lot of money. by not pretending to go through education. And they can either use that money, the extra profit that they get, to go buy agencies, or to take business away from agencies that aren't adequately educating their clients on the value of coverages. Or the other thing they can do is they can say, look, we're so profitable now that we're not pretending to go through the education process, that we don't need as much commission from you, dear company. If you will cut the commission a little bit so we can offer a little bit lower price, we'll go out and sell even more insurance. And carriers are open to that concept. So there's, this new class of insurance distributors has legs. I saw one, they've, in first 5 years of existence, and this is a firm that they called me once and they said, we need help with an underwriting manual. And I was like, an underwriting manual? You don't know what an underwriting manual is? And this is a 5-year-old firm that has $100 million of premium already on the books. That's the significance of what I'm talking about here. They don't care. So we have a situation of underwriters not underwriting coverage because they don't understand the risk, adjusters denying it because they can't read a policy correctly. And all of that costs us extra money. It costs us extra friction. It deteriorates and breaks down relationships between carriers, agencies, insureds. And the only people that really benefit are the ones that are already cutting corners and plaintiff attorneys. And the plaintiff attorneys benefit greatly by this. I don't see it as a winning formula. So I wanted to help fix that. So next step, I identified the problem. Next step was, what's wrong with traditional education? So here's what my research showed. Generic coverage education is insufficient. Agents and even underwriters are not selling or servicing generic coverage. They are selling specific coverage. I had an agent call me and she says, hey, I've got a massive E&O problem on my hands. I went to this private passenger auto class and they said that trailers were automatically covered. So I told all of my clients that trailers were automatically covered. Well, my major carrier, with whom I have 70% of my personal lines book, they exclude trailers. What do I do? It's like, well, I think you need to communicate with your 2,000 personal lines agent clients really quickly that you gave them bad advice. And there's no other solution to that. And I kept seeing this where they would go to a generic class and they wouldn't take the time to learn their own forms. And so there's an assumption made in our industry, within the education part of our industry, that people are motivated then to go take the generic coverage training and figure out what applies on proprietary forms. And as we, in this industry in the last 3 years, so much business has moved from standard to surplus lines. That's a horrendous assumption to make. We should not be training on generic coverages when so much business is proprietary forms. That's a recipe for disaster. And to assume that people are going to go out and figure it out on their own isn't going to happen. Next part of my research was, is there something about adults and about the learning environment that we use in our world? Well, one of the things that I learned in studying this was adults learn differently than children. But our industry still sets up the classes, literally sets up the way that the classroom is set up is as if you were in first grade. We still have a schoolroom setting. That is not conducive to adults. Adults do not learn well when there's a preacher preaching from the pulpit, like I'm doing today, which I wish I could do it differently. It doesn't work for adults. You hear the saying, somebody goes to 6 hours of CE class and they go, wow, if I get one thing out of the day, it's going to be a successful learning day. Man, that's a pretty darn low bar to kind of say, hey, if 6 hours, I get one thing. Well, that's because we have the wrong environment for adults. Adults learn by doing. Adults don't learn by reading. They don't learn by listening. We have to find a way to combine preaching from the pulpit, telling them to go read a policy, with doing. Barring that, our education programs are going to have very limited value. And that came out of researching how adults learn. And I spent a lot of time studying how adults learn to figure out how to do this. So then, based on that, what do I want to do? Well, I'm going to focus my program that I'll share with you on the forms that they're actually selling, on the forms that they're actually underwriting to. I do not allow any generic forms to be part of my classes. We teach to the exact forms they are using daily. And that way they are able to apply their knowledge as soon as they walk out the door, specific to the actual reality of the real world. I don't like ivory towers. I don't like pretend, and I don't like the assumption that adults are going to figure this out on their own. Our job as educators, I think, is to create a real world learning environment. The doing required forcing people to do homework. So all of my classes require the participants to go do something with the knowledge, to go research something. And furthermore, what we learned through the research and the testing and I did 2 years of testing before I launched this, was that not only do they have to go research it, they have to respond to me with their homework in writing and or verbally, how they're going to explain these coverages. How are they going to explain the claim situation? How are they going to explain whatever it is? If I'm teaching underwriters, it's how are you going to explain this to an agent? If I'm teaching agents, how are they going to explain it to the insured? Because what good is education if you can't communicate your knowledge?
So Chris, there was 2 questions.
Yes.
One was, do you include ISO forms in your classes for wording or for structure?
Never.
Never. So even if they're the basis of the policy that the client's selling, you wouldn't use that a modified or endorsed policy. You'd still just use the.
Never.
Okay.
What I'll say is, if you've got ABC Insurance Company that's using an ISO based form, then show me what that ISO based form is, and we'll go off that. But I'm not going to use generic. What I find
ones they're actually
is that a lot of people. Sorry, what I found initially was that a lot of people think they read more into the ISO based forms and they don't dive deeper into any of the changes. Mm-hmm. And so it just wasn't, it's not really successful.
Yeah. And a lot of them who think that they have ISO forms, it says includes material from ISO, but does not.
It's a different thing, right? It says includes material. It doesn't say it's ISO.
Correct.
A lot of confusion out there about that.
One other question was from Michael. He was saying, I found underwriters are very secretive about their processes and don't want to talk to me, brokers, or even the named insured. So I think this is a retail agent, but he's from Sweet Construction. What suggestions do you have to get them to talk to you or to reveal their underwriting process? Like, what makes a good customer? What makes a good quote? I think that's part of what makes it so you can get the coverages that you need to have this dialogue, this conversation.
I love that question. So I get that question a lot from my better from the better producers and account managers when I'm teaching agencies. And it only comes from the better ones, which I find interesting. So first of all, know your forms, because one of the things that happens is that a lot of the underwriters that are really secretive, they're secretive of their ignorance. And by knowing the form really well, it gives you an opportunity to open the door and expose their ignorance. And in fact, I'll tell you a really funny story. A call right before we started this. an agent called me and talked about a conversation with their underwriter yesterday, exactly like this. And they said, you know what, one of the great benefits of this is lets me drive the conversation instead of the underwriter. So go back to the forms, really study the forms, understand it inside and out, and then use that to get it to go. Understand though that with some underwriters, unfortunately, they're right now in our world, there's two problems. One is they are under orders to not write on a blanket basis certain kinds of accounts without regards to how good that account actually is. Top management has come down and said, we are doing blanket underwriting. We don't care. Now, that's silly on a lot of levels, but that's the reality of the real world. And you're not going to get through in those cases. It doesn't matter what you tell the underwriter. And then the other cases, you have underwriters that are truly ignorant, and they're going to just make life really difficult for you no matter what. So you can continue to beat your head against the wall with those underwriters. I think the better solution is to just do business with much stronger carriers if you have an opportunity to do that. The underwriters that have that attitude typically are not with the strongest carriers who have the best future anyway. I don't have a life outside of insurance for everybody listening. All I do is study insurance from every angle that I can think of. So one of the other things I do is I study insurance company financials, and then I match them up to how difficult their underwriters are in placing business. It's funny what the correlations are. I'm doing a major project for several carriers on that level right now. It's pretty interesting. There's a correlation. So, keep going, unless there's more questions real quickly. Let me tell you about all the painful lessons I learned when I started setting up this education program. I felt like I was beating my head against the wall. I was like, I studied this a lot before I created it. What did I miss? How could I screw it up so much? Well, one of the things I learned was that a lot of people in our industry can't write. And it's like, well, that's a problem from an E&O perspective. When you don't write well, that creates E&O problems. When you can't communicate with an underwriter because you don't write well, you use crazy abbreviations that nobody else understands. It's like you write a full-blown email explaining how great an account is, but you're writing it like it's a text or something. That's ridiculous. So I went back and I started forcing everybody in my classes to write it out. No abbreviations allowed. Write it out in good English. If the homework comes back to me and the English is poor, the sentence structure is poor, I literally send it back to people and say, rewrite it. There's no point in communicating with poor English. That's crazy. So that's one of the things I learned we needed to deal with. Another one that really caught me was I'll use an agency example. In my beta testing, I went to a very large agency, one of the 50 largest independent agencies, and they allowed me to do some beta testing. So I was working with their personal lines team. And the question that I had asked, the homework, was, how do you explain an adverse underwriting decision to an insured in a constructive manner? And the head of personal lines said to me, I would say that the underwriter doesn't want the risk. I say, no, that's great, but how do you explain it in a constructive way so that you can show that you've worked for the insured and that you're going to work to find an alternative solution, or if they address the risk differently, there's a way to maybe write it. How do you do this constructively? And the person says, I would say that the underwriter's declining. Like, no. How do you, and I probably went through this 5 or 6 times, and it was pretty pointless. We make the assumption when we teach classes that people have the communication skills to convey this information, and they don't always have that. So when we're teaching, we have to teach it in a way, I think, so that it is usable in the real world. So all of my classes, again, I said this earlier now, but all my classes are taught so that if it's an underwriter, explain that coverage, the applicability of that coverage, the underwriting that goes around it, as you would to an agent that maybe doesn't know all the differences. And that's a way to get back to the underwriter that isn't telling you the underwriter secrets. Can you explain to me in detail, in layman's terms, what the structure is that you're going through to make your decisions? Send me a note so that I can understand it, maybe so, and make it a positive so that I can use your instructions and your detail to better educate people in my office so that we don't send you accounts that you don't really want to write, and I won't waste your time. It's funny what you'll uncover when you say things like that to an underwriter. Odds are very high you'll uncover ignorance versus someone that just is hiding how they actually do the underwriting. So I feel very strongly this has to be part of education programs. And then I'll tell you the one that really shook me up. I got done with the class and I just had to take a break. I was teaching a class to an agency owner. This is a person that had been selling insurance and been in the owned the agency for, I think it was 17 years. It was a cyber class, and they weren't getting it. And I said, well, let's go to the form itself. So let's go to whatever page it was, page 11, section B3. And there was a look of terror on her face because I do all my classes by Zoom or in person. And I said, he's like, what do you mean? Turn to page 11 and B3. I was like, well, you turn to page 11, section B3. And she says, you don't get it. I've never read a policy. What do I do? It's like, what? You've never read a policy ever? What? It's like, I don't think my classes are for you. We need, I literally took it and I now have an entire program. I created a whole nother set of classes on how to read a policy for people that have never read a policy. Because I started finding that a lot of people have never read a policy in our industry. So I was like, well, okay, I have nothing better to do than live another life, but I'll go create that too. So I did, but that's another story. So really painful for me to learn what it was. But the biggest pain, the worst lesson, most painful lesson I learned was this. And that is that a whole lot of people in our industry had the classes when I started teaching these classes were really upset at me. They complained to their bosses. They tried to get me fired. They tried it was like jury duty. They were trying to get out of the classes because they said, I don't want to have to think. Just give me the answers. Every other class I go to, they give me the answers. Give me the answers. Why don't you just give me the answers? Well, the real world is every form is different. Every client is different. And even if every insurance company in the world use ISO, it doesn't really matter because every client is still different. And we need to be solving for the client. If someone doesn't want to think, that's artificial intelligence is going to take your job. There is no need for an underwriter that doesn't think. And in fact, I was asked to give a presentation to the C-suite of an insurance company. And I made the following statement. I said, right now, insurance companies are wasting their money on underwriting. I said, right now, you're paying underwriters to underwrite, you're paying predictive modeling to underwrite, and you're paying, in the independent insurance agency world, you're paying agents to upfront underwrite through contingency commissions. Why in the world would you pay 3 entities to do one job? What an incredible waste of money. And the head of underwriting was sitting up at the front of the room, and his face went gray when he realized that he and his staff were soon out of a job. Because no one needs an underwriter that can't think something through. No one needs an agent that can't think through the coverages as they apply to a specific client. AI will take these jobs. That's what AI is designed to do. So if you're near retirement, it's not a problem. But if you still have a long career ahead of you and you don't want to think, probably should find a different career. So it looks like we have some other chats or questions.
Yes, so there were two, really one that I don't know that were addressed. So at least some comments to support, you might want to add some too, is one person found in the construction industry, as we know, can be one of the more complicated pieces of insurance. Most insurance professionals only read certificates of insurance. I'm sure that doesn't shock you, Chris.
No, that's very true.
Yeah. And very shameful, actually, from somebody who's a construction guy. I think that's shameful.
I think it's totally shameful. It's horrible that happens. Yes.
Yeah, and then Amy was really saying insurance is gray. There's no easy answers.
No.
And if you're not reading the form and you're looking for the easy answer, then you're probably not doing a good job for your customer. So
yeah, I'd say it goes beyond probably. I'd say it's pretty much 100% certain you're not doing a good job for the client.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I agree.
And there was one.
The problem we have in the industry is we have a lot of people that don't even pretend, and they are gaining momentum. If we have to fix our education system so that we can imbue upon the clients the value of education. If we don't get enough people with high enough quality education that can communicate that, because if you're the agent at the retail level and you're walking in sometimes and you're the first person to say to the client, you know, your coverage isn't applicable to your exposures. Mm-hmm. And they've been doing business with that same broker for the last 10 years. What you're basically saying to that client is, you made a really stupid choice in your broker. And you can't say that. You can't cause them to think that and hope to get the account or change anything.
So one of our team members is saying she remembers a class she held on abuse and molestation liability in January, and that I know that coverage is really important for anybody in social services, education, healthcare. I mean, that's a top subject. And the student asked her a question, and she said, "Great question. Let's look up the coverage, what the coverage form has. Let's take it out and read it." And the student said, "Do we have to? Can't you just tell me the answer?" You and I talked about this over the last couple of weeks, so you know what I think about that.
Yeah, I'll tell you something else. Tell all of you some. When I first started embarking upon this, one of the questions I asked and started researching was, at the retail agent level, broker level, should there be a new class of licenses, one for professionals and one for amateurs? And because I think the standard of care is in most states, not all states, it's designed for the amateurs right now.
Yeah.
And
so,
I was,
yeah. And if you're not going to read policy forms, if you're not going to get into there, then you're an amateur and you're likely to stay that way.
You are. And I was told that if I brought that up in public, I would have several insurance commissioners hand my head to me on a silver platter, which I think that's a pretty damning statement on education in our industry. Another factor that I think we have to address is maybe it's generational. I've run into people that say, well, the molestation clause, can't we just Google it? I hear that a lot. Can't we just Google it? We don't need to read the form. Google will have the answers, right? So maybe it's generational. Another part, though, that I've thought about.
They don't like Google in the courtroom when there's an actual policy.
No, they don't, do they? As an expert witness, I can promise you they do not allow Google in the courtroom.
That's a shame.
The judge kind of looks down at you when you say that. Sometimes as an expert witness, it can be kind of fun to just see what you can get away with here and there within very narrow confines, but it's kind of funny. But one of the things I think we have to also address is the quality of our hires. With my kids growing up, I'd always tell stories about insurance, and I was like, everybody in this industry ends up here by accident. And so they that's just dad talking. They didn't take it seriously. But this summer, my daughter took an internship at a major insurance company, and the first 2 orientation classes, the person speaking said, "Oh man, I never thought I'd end up insurance either. It was totally by accident." And she calls me that night. She's like, "You're right. Everybody gets here by accident." And so, A students don't end up in places by accident, and industries focus on hiring A students. Maybe we are an industry that doesn't really hire the best and the brightest, and that's part of the issue. So I think that's something that we probably should be considering as well at all levels. I know I ended up in here by accident. I wasn't an A student in college. College was more about having a good time than getting A's. So very painful lessons in bringing us together. It took me about 3 to 4 years to figure out how to build this and make it work. This is a super complex industry, a lot of gray area. If you think about it, we're selling legal contracts. The people selling the contracts, the underwriters underwriting to the contracts, and the people buying the contracts, none of the 3 have a legal background. It's a pretty oxymoronic system. Shouldn't attorneys sell legal contracts? Wouldn't that make sense? But no, we don't do it that way. And so that complexity has caused the oversimplification of insurance. And that's a driving force in dumbing everything down. It's very complex. No one involved has the full education. So the way to sell it is through animated characters and make it sound way simpler than it is, which violates Albert Einstein's quote of everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. We have totally violated that in the way we advertise and sell insurance, and that's not good. So I decided when I launched my education program, here's what I did. Number 1, there had to be hard parameters. It had to be about the results and not money. If I was doing this for the money, I would quit doing it tomorrow, because to make it about the results is a really difficult. It's difficult to make the money that you see in a big group environment, because one of the things about adult learning is you have to have a safe learning environment. You can't have competitors in the room and expect somebody to put their hand up and ask questions where they know that they're ignorant. That's not going to happen. So my classes prohibit any competitors to be in the room. Most of my classes are homogenous people from the same agency or the same insurance company. I do some heterogeneous classes, but I vet the situation so that all the people are completely spread out and they will never interact with one another, because that safe learning environment is crucial. I try to make it all a group learning environment, because I found that breaking the classes for the homework into group sessions creates significantly, exponentially more learning. People walk away with far more knowledge when I did it that way. Another lesson learned. And then another one is the participants must be there on their own accord. They must be willing to do the work. They must be willing to engage their brains. And in my contracts with my clients, I have a clause now that says, if any of the people taking this class are not willing to exert the effort, then I have the right to fire them. They can't come back to my class. And I will fire them. I have done that because one of the things about adult learning is we need to treat people as adults. And if an adult doesn't want to learn and they're there, they're sucking the energy out of that room. Even if they don't disrupt it, which a lot of them will, they're still sucking the energy out of it. They're taking away from the people that want to be there. The way most of the classes are designed in our world is as if they were still school children, and it's up to the instructor to find a way to engage everybody in that room. These are adults. Treat them as adults. They are either going to be engaged and want to be there and become professional, or they're not. Call it for what it is. From my perspective, I have some luxury in firing these people. Some of you probably don't have that luxury, but maybe there's a way that you can frame the way you teach to at least migrate over or nudge the environment to that point, because we need to accept these are adults, and to try to teach people that don't want to be there is very similar to trying to push a rope. You're not going to get very far. So here's some slides on how I explain it. If I'm explaining this to an agency, I have a different slide deck for explaining it to a broker or a carrier. And I'll wrap up here. This is what's different about the program that I created. One of the things is we acknowledge that most agents have never really learned their coverages. And even if they've learned them, they don't understand them. There's a difference between learning them and truly understanding those coverages. And even if they understand them, they don't always know how to apply them to their clients' exposures. So how do we do this? How do we make it client-centric? So pretty much 100% of all insurance classes are coverage-centric or form-centric. I wanted to make this client-centric. What difference does it make what the form says if it doesn't apply to the client? Let's start putting the client first instead of the forms first. It's kind of egotistical to put the form first. Doesn't make any sense. So let's put the client first and then work backwards to find the form and the coverage that fits them the best. Next, let's bridge the gulf between the insurance language and the consumer language. Next, every one of my classes is designed to build on that person's existing knowledge. Some cases I have a test where everybody has to take the test before they start the class. Business income is one of the subjects for which I do the test. I find that somewhere around 95% of all commercial producers don't know hardly anything whatsoever about business income, much less contingent business income, or much less there's six different major business income coverages. Most can maybe name two. And I'll tell you, like I said at the beginning, I'm a CBA, Certified Business Appraiser. This is important for everybody here. I do a lot of my CE, my continuing ed that I have to maintain my CBA designation. The business appraisal world has one of the most excellent business income programs that exist anywhere in North America. They're training somewhere between 100 and 200 expert witnesses a year on business income. I got certified in their business income program. It was phenomenal. And these are people that understand business income really well. They're being trained as expert witnesses to go against carriers who are adjusting the claims in business income claims incorrectly. And they're being trained to go against agents for E&O purposes. So there's a new angle that's coming out of this as to why education is so important. It's really phenomenal training that they offer there. So I test people in some cases, a few simple questions in the first class gives me the knowledge I need to adjust my training to wherever they are starting. Then we focus on the coverages, the forms that they actually sell, and their actual clients. I ask for all the homework to be done with examples of their clients, their agents, whatever their real world is. And then the next thing we do that we learned about is that adults learn in modular bite-sized approaches. The idea of sending an adult to a 6-hour program and getting full value out of it is that's not realistic. All of our classes are 1 hour, period. That's it. That's how adults learn. They learn in 1 hour. Past that, their ability to learn drains pretty quickly. All of our group classes are in small groups. Adults learn best in small groups. A lot of research from a lot of different fields have gone into this. Varying situations, but the ideal group is about 7 people. My classes are limited to 10, but there has to be at least preferably 4 people. Sometimes I'll go to 3, but I prefer 4. There's a lot of advantages to that. We do role play, verbal role play. They do written role play. We make sure that when they get done, they actually understand the coverages and they can think it through. And really, at the end of the day, my goal is to teach people to fish. I'm not here to give people answers to a form. I'm here to help people figure out how to look at the next form and find the answers for themselves. That's the long-lasting value of what I want to bring to the table. And I think that by putting clients first, coverages second, we can get there. And I'm going to give you an example of why this is so important. And for all the carrier people that are listening, this is a really important point, because if we don't start putting clients first with the products that we're offering, we are pretty much working ourselves out of an industry. And we're not on the commercial level providing the coverages that clients actually need. And here's the proof of that. This is from Aon. Aon does a study every other year, I think it is. So one of the things that we don't insure intangible assets. 20 to 40% of small private businesses' values are in assets. Insurance agencies, 99% of their value is in the form of intangible assets. Aon's study shows that the intangible asset value has increased 255% versus 97% for tangible assets. Only 17% of intangible assets even have insurance coverage. The average firm has $1.2 million in just information assets. And maybe text me later, somebody could say, hey, I have a form that provides coverage for the theft of intangible assets. I haven't found it. But the intangible assets are more valuable than the tangible ones. Why aren't we providing coverage for this? So for those that are part of this that are agents, if all we're out there is selling the form that's available, we're missing over 50% of the commercial client's actual value. What's the point of being in an industry where we ignore upwards of 90% of our clients' value? That's nonsensical. So if you're an agent here, we have to focus on the client, because the carriers aren't providing the coverages that they need. We're going to lose. So one of the benefits, and we've measured this, of my program, we find that if you offer clients the right coverage, they buy the right coverage more often, which is pretty cool for everybody. Everyone's sales go higher, values increase, relationships improve. Life is just very, very, very good. And I think we put some of the amateurs out of business, and I'm all for putting amateurs out of business. I think that just works for our industry better. And we are able to provide, it sounds kind of like almost, somebody said it's almost like a religion for me, but insurance is one of the greatest tools ever invented to make the world a safer place for people. And we are able to fulfill that role when we're educated, and we're educated in a way that helps adults learn. So we have a few minutes left. Any other questions?
So, Chris, one was a specific question. Can you repeat where to attend the BI continuing ed classes? Business interruption, of course, one of the toughest things and the hardest claims to address.
Yeah, you have to be a member of the business appraisal world, but they're put on by the organizations called NACFA, National Association of Valuation Consultants Association, I think it is. But they're the primary education source for business appraisers, or one of the primary ones. They have a very, very good program.
So there was another, thank you, Chris. So there was another few comments about career starting as an assistant. Account manager was training and had them read actual policies, coverage forms. And then there was another one about people coming out of risk management and actuarial programs, and showing up at the agency. So do you believe in, no matter what somebody's education level is, when they walk in the door, give them an insurance policy and say, let's read it and talk about it?
I'm 100% for that. I mean, I've met a lot of actuaries in my life that have no clue what they're actuating to. It's like, I saw one yesterday, they said, what do you want your numbers to be? Well, that's crazy if you don't even know what the exposures are as presented in the forms.
So there was another comment about understanding coverage needs is just huge for product developments at on the carrier research side, their development teams. I mean, if the carriers don't hear about our demand for new products or what's not being addressed, then it's very hard to develop a new coverage. So how do you foster this communication a little better? Like on
That's a great question. I've been there. I'll tell you a funny story. I was speaking at a carrier agent event, and the carriers got up at the front of the room and said, hey, we've got this new product. And I looked at the head of underwriting standing next to me, and I said, are you kidding me? You guys aren't the kind of company that would offer that kind of product. It was, a fairly complicated commercial form. And he looked at me and goes, oh, no, we don't have that product. We just want to tell everybody we do. It's like, what? Where do you guys come up with this stuff? In many cases, it's just a real pain, and you're going to have to get fairly high up in communicating to the carrier what it is. But understand that a lot of carriers, the people high up, they're not paid to be innovative. They're paid to maintain status quo. And that's one of the neatest things I've seen come out of the industry in the last 5 years, are all these new MGAs and DUAs that are creating very specific products, innovative products that the regular insurance companies just shook their head at and said, oh, that's for somebody else, and nobody really needs that. And these MGAs and DUAs are doing our industry a great favor by developing those products. So pay attention to that space. If you're an agent, do your due diligence before you engage with those new MGAs and DUAs. The level of fraud that's in that space is significant. Be very careful.
There's a lot of smart people who are creating these new products at those. So I mean, it's a very important part of the market to engage with. So very good comment was this last one was risk management and insurance students, teaching them how to go is this claim covered? Here's a policy form. Here's a claim scenario. How often do you use that, Chris?
Yeah, for brand new people, definitely. A lot of you are probably familiar. The former head of site is Bill Wilson. And his book, When Words Collide, is just the best book I've ever seen written that really gets to that question. I love that book. And I think it should be part of every college insurance education program.
Yeah, I've read Chris's book. It's great. I certainly quoted him earlier. If you read that book or you read anything from Bill, you'll see RTFP written all over it. Read your choice of whatever you put in the F box is full policy of read the policy. That's just absolutely part of everything that we do as insurance professionals. So I think we're just about out of time unless somebody has another question. Somebody put really also just a really good one of list of endorsements we should try to get on every policy. Hey, here's the things you should do, and here's why. And just for not only for E&O purposes, but for understanding purposes and taking care of customers. So
Yeah, absolutely. And when you do that, it sounds like an agent saying that. If you're an agent, one caveat to that is make sure you're not only listing the form, but make sure you list the form name, the form number, and the edition date, so that people don't make a mistake of listing the wrong version of that endorsement.
So thank you, Chris, for joining us today. Very good information. Great discussion. Thank you, everybody, for participating in the chat. And please do join us. We have these other two seminars, October 13th and November 10th. Great subjects and speakers, and we hope you will join us. So thanks for joining us, everybody, and I hope you have a wonderful Friday.
Thank you. Thank you again, Chris. It was excellent.
Thank you.
And you can stick around if you got any other questions I didn't get to. Chris we could put him on the spot. Well, or unless he's gone. But thanks, everybody.
Well, I got to tell you, Craig, I just felt like putting my hand up and yelling, preach the whole time.
Go with me. Let's go.
Where?
So that was a good discussion. So you're on deck next month.
All right.
So I think you're our moderator for next month as your speaker, and
right.
And I can support you. But no, we'll keep this up. So I like it.
I like it. You set the bar high. We're good.
Thanks, Heather. I think we had 60-something people register, and we had about up to 30 people who joined us.
That's about average. There's about half of the folks. So, and if you haven't set up the Zoom for next month, make sure that we kind of turn off that function where it sends like a registration confirmation email back to us, because we get like our email box, like we keep getting emails saying that people have registered, which is great for us to know, but we can monitor registration by just going into the Zoom account and checking it out on a regular basis. So turn that off. And if there's any other data you want to collect in your registration, company names, I know we get email addresses and names of people, but if you want to do company names and locations, you can put that in your registration options as well for Zoom too.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So Jen, I will be in Vancouver at a live seminar on next Wednesday. So I probably will not join our call. So if you want to get with Sandy and talk about guiding through that and setting up that call with the description and just kind of walking through on the setup and the web setup and make that appointment, let Heather know it's out there.
Yeah. And Jen, if you want to just hit me up at some point, if Sandy doesn't have all that information, I'll be happy to walk you through the process of getting it done.
I love it.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Well, have a wonderful day.
All right.
All right. Y'all take care. Thanks again, Craig. You rock.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.